Sarah Mitchell always knew something was wrong when she started receiving strange calls on her husband's phone. Married for 15 years to David, she never imagined that the $2 million inheritance left by her grandmother would become the catalyst for her family's destruction. It all began when Sarah received the unexpected inheritance. Her maternal grandmother, an Italian immigrant who had built a small restaurant empire in Boston, had left her entire fortune to her favorite granddaughter. David, who worked as a sales manager at a car dealership, was ecstatic with the news. "Now we can fulfill all our dreams," he said, embracing Sarah with an enthusiasm she hadn't seen in years. But dreams quickly turned into nightmares. Within 6 months, Sarah noticed alarming changes in their financial situation. Credit card bills arrived with charges she didn't recognize. Expensive jewelry, luxury hotel stays, designer clothes she had never seen. When she confronted David, he claimed they were business expenses or gifts for her that he wanted to keep as surprises. The truth came crashing down on a rainy Thursday evening. Sarah's best friend, Rebecca, called with news that would shatter her world. "Sarah, I saw David at the Four Seasons downtown. He was with a woman. They looked very intimate." Rebecca's voice trembled as she delivered the devastating blow. She was wearing a diamond necklace that must have cost a fortune. Sarah felt her knees buckle. The diamond necklace Rebecca described matched exactly the charge she had questioned on their credit card statement just weeks before. David had claimed it was a surprise anniversary gift he was planning. The lies were unraveling faster than she could process them. That night, Sarah pretended to be asleep when David came home. She listened to him shower, smelling the unfamiliar perfume that clung to his clothes as he undressed. The scent was expensive, sophisticated, everything Sarah felt she wasn't anymore. At 42, she had devoted her life to their marriage, their home, and her career as a high school English teacher. She had never suspected that her loyalty would be rewarded with such betrayal. The next morning, while David was at work, Sarah began her investigation. She hired a private investigator named Marcus Webb, a former police detective who specialized in marital infidelity cases. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said during their first meeting at a small cafe downtown, "I've seen cases like this before. Men who suddenly come into money often feel entitled to live a different life. The question is, how far are you willing to go to uncover the truth?" Sarah looked Marcus directly in the eyes. "As far as necessary." Within 2 weeks, Marcus had compiled a comprehensive dossier that made Sarah's blood run cold. David's mistress was Vanessa Blackwood, a 28-year-old art gallery owner with expensive tastes and flexible morals. The photographs Marcus provided showed David and Vanessa at exclusive restaurants, luxury shopping centers, and romantic getaways to Miami, Napa Valley, and even Paris, all paid for with Sarah's inheritance money. But the most devastating discovery was yet to come. Marcus had traced over $800,000 of Sarah's inheritance that David had secretly transferred to his personal accounts and subsequently spent on Vanessa. He had purchased her a BMW convertible, paid for her gallery's expensive renovation, bought her a designer wardrobe, and even put a down payment on a luxury condo in Manhattan's Upper East Side, all while telling Sarah they needed to be conservative. With their newfound wealth, the betrayal cut deeper than Sarah had thought possible. This wasn't just infidelity. It was theft, manipulation, and the systematic destruction of her trust and financial security. David had stolen her grandmother's legacy, money that was meant to secure their future together, and squandered it on a woman young enough to be his daughter. Sarah's initial impulse was confrontation, followed by a swift divorce. But as she sat in her empty house, surrounded by the modest furniture they had accumulated over 15 years of marriage, a different emotion began to take hold. Rage, cold, calculating rage that demanded more than just legal proceedings and asset division. That's when Sarah decided that David and Vanessa deserved something far more comprehensive than a simple divorce. They deserved to experience the same devastation they had inflicted on her. Sarah began planning her revenge with the methodical precision of a chess master. She knew that both David and Vanessa were vulnerable in ways they couldn't imagine. David's position at the dealership depended on his reputation for honesty and reliability. Vanessa's art gallery catered to wealthy clients who valued discretion and integrity. Both had built their lives on carefully constructed facades that Sarah was about to demolish. Her first move was financial. Working with a forensic accountant recommended by her divorce lawyer, Sarah documented every fraudulent transaction David had made with her inheritance money. She discovered that David had not only stolen from her, but had also been embezzling money from his dealership to fund additional expenses for Vanessa. The evidence was overwhelming and legally bulletproof. But Sarah wanted more than just financial restitution. She wanted them to feel the emotional devastation she had experienced. Through Marcus, Sarah learned that Vanessa was engaged in her own deceptions. The art gallery was actually owned by Vanessa's wealthy father, who had no idea his daughter was involved with a married man. Vanessa had told David she was a successful entrepreneur, when in reality she was a trust fund baby playing at business with her father's money. Moreover, Vanessa was simultaneously dating two other wealthy men, playing them against each other for financial gain. Sarah realized that Vanessa was a professional manipulator who had targeted David specifically because of his sudden wealth. The revelation should have made Sarah feel vindicated, but instead it made her angrier. David hadn't just betrayed her for love. He had been played by a woman who saw him as nothing more than a meal ticket. The second phase of Sarah's revenge involved exposing both David and Vanessa's deceptions to the people who mattered most in their lives. She began by contacting Vanessa's father, Richard Blackwood, a prominent real estate developer who prided himself on his family's reputation. Sarah arranged to meet him at his office under the pretense of discussing a real estate investment. "Mr. Blackwood," Sarah said, sitting across from him in his mahogany-paneled office, "I have some information about your daughter that I think you should know." She presented him with photographs, financial records, and evidence of Vanessa's multiple relationships with married men. She explained how Vanessa was using his money and his gallery to facilitate her affairs with wealthy married clients. Richard Blackwood's face turned ashen as he reviewed the evidence. "This can't be true," he whispered, but the documentation was irrefutable. Sarah watched as the realization dawned on him that his daughter was not the innocent art lover he believed her to be, but rather a sophisticated con artist who was destroying families for financial gain. "I'm sorry to be the bearer of this news," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the satisfaction she felt. "But I thought you should know what your money was really funding." Within days, Richard Blackwood had frozen Vanessa's access to the galleries, accounts, and initiated an audit of all her financial activities. The luxury condo David had helped purchase was seized, the BMW was repossessed, and Vanessa found herself cut off from the financial resources that had enabled her lifestyle. But Sarah wasn't finished. Her next target was David's professional life. She contacted the general manager of David's dealership and presented evidence of his embezzlement. The amounts were significant, over $200,000 that David had skimmed from customer payments and financing deals to fund his affair with Vanessa. The dealership's investigation was swift and thorough. Within a week, David was terminated from his position and faced criminal charges for embezzlement and fraud. The local business community, which was tight-knit and gossipy, quickly learned about David's downfall. His reputation was destroyed overnight. Meanwhile, Sarah began the third phase of her revenge, social destruction. She created anonymous social media accounts and began systematically exposing David and Vanessa's affair to their mutual friends, colleagues, and family members. She shared the photographs Marcus had taken, along with detailed accounts of how they had spent her grandmother's inheritance money. The response was immediate and devastating. David's family, who had always been conservative and traditional, were horrified by his behavior. His parents, who had loved Sarah like a daughter, cut off all contact with him. His brother, a respected local pastor, publicly distanced himself from David's actions. Vanessa faced her own social reckoning. Wealthy clients who had patronized her gallery were disgusted by the scandal. In their circles, discretion was paramount, and Vanessa's affair with a married man, especially one who had stolen money from his wife to fund their relationship, was seen as vulgar and unacceptable. Orders were canceled, exhibitions were boycotted, and Vanessa found herself persona non grata in the art world she had worked so hard to penetrate. But the most devastating blow was yet to come. Sarah had discovered that David and Vanessa had been planning to leave their respective lives behind and start fresh in California with what remained of the inheritance money. They had already put deposits on a house in Malibu and were planning to open a new art gallery together. Sarah made sure those dreams died before they could take root. She contacted the California real estate agent and the potential business partners, providing them with detailed information about David and Vanessa's criminal activities and questionable character. The house deal fell through, the business partnerships evaporated, and their escape plan crumbled. As the weeks passed, Sarah watched with cold satisfaction as David and Vanessa's relationship began to deteriorate under the pressure of their destroyed lives. Without money, social standing, or future prospects, their romance quickly soured. Vanessa, who had been attracted to David's apparent wealth and stability, found herself repulsed by his criminal behavior and social disgrace. David, meanwhile, realized that Vanessa had been using him all along and was unwilling to stand by him now that the money was gone. Their breakup was as public and messy as their affair had been. Vanessa accused David of lying about his financial situation and blamed him for ruining her reputation. David countered by revealing Vanessa's other relationships and her manipulative behavior. Their mutual accusations provided fresh gossip for a community that was already fascinated by their downfall. The final act of Sarah's revenge came during the divorce proceedings. With all the evidence she had gathered, Sarah's lawyer was able to prove not only adultery, but also theft, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. The court ordered David to pay full restitution for the stolen inheritance money, plus punitive damages and legal fees. Since David had already spent most of the money and had no legitimate assets left, the judgment effectively left him financially ruined for years to come. Moreover, the criminal charges against David resulted in a plea bargain that included jail time, probation, and mandatory restitution to both Sarah and his former employer. David would spend the next 2 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation, during which his financial activities would be closely monitored. Vanessa faced her own legal consequences. Her father's investigation had revealed that she had been using the gallery's accounts for personal expenses and had been selling artwork without proper documentation. While she avoided criminal charges, by agreeing to make full restitution, her reputation in the art world was permanently destroyed. She was forced to close the gallery and move back in with her parents. Her dreams of independence and sophistication shattered. As Sarah sat in her lawyer's office, signing the final divorce papers, she felt a complex mixture of emotions. Satisfaction of justice was tempered by the recognition that her actions had been as destructive as they were justified. She had successfully destroyed the lives of the 2 people who had betrayed her, but in doing so, she had also transformed herself into someone she barely recognized. The woman who had once believed in forgiveness and second chances had become calculating and ruthless. The teacher who had dedicated her life to nurturing young minds had discovered a capacity for psychological warfare that frightened her. Sarah realized that while her revenge had been complete and devastating, it had also changed her fundamentally. In the months that followed, Sarah attempted to rebuild her life. She had recovered most of her inheritance money through the legal proceedings, and she had the satisfaction of knowing that justice had been served. But the emotional toll of her revenge campaign had been significant. The rage that had sustained her through the planning and execution of her elaborate scheme had burned out, leaving behind an emptiness that was almost as painful as the original betrayal. Sarah found herself isolated from many of her former friends, who were uncomfortable with the extent of her revenge. While they sympathized with her situation, they were disturbed by the methodical way she had destroyed David and Vanessa's lives. Some whispered that she had gone too far, that her actions were as morally questionable as the betrayal that had triggered them. The community that had once rallied around Sarah as the wronged wife began to view her with a mixture of fear and respect. They had seen what she was capable of when crossed, and while they admired her intelligence and determination, they also recognized that she had revealed a capacity for destruction that made them wary of getting too close. Sarah's relationship with her own family became strained as well. While they supported her right to seek justice, they were concerned about the person she had become in the process. Her sister, Linda, confronted her during a family dinner 6 months after the divorce was finalized. "Sarah, I understand why you did what you did," Linda said carefully, "but I'm worried about you. The way you planned and executed this revenge, ... it's not like you. You've always been the forgiving one, the one who saw the best in people. I'm afraid you've lost something important about yourself." Sarah stared at her sister, recognizing the truth in her words, but unable to summon regret for her actions. "They stole my grandmother's legacy, Linda. They didn't just betray me. They stole the money that was meant to honor her memory and secure my future. Some things can't be forgiven." But even as she spoke the words, Sarah wondered if she had paid too high a price for her revenge. She had recovered her money and destroyed her enemies, but in the process, she had also destroyed her own capacity for trust, compassion, and human connection. 2 years later, as David was released from prison, Sarah heard through mutual acquaintances that he had become a broken man. The confident, charismatic salesman she had married had been replaced by someone who struggled with depression, alcoholism, and social isolation. He worked part-time jobs to pay his court-ordered restitution and lived in a studio apartment in a rough part of town. Vanessa had fared little better. After her art gallery scandal, she had been unable to find work in her chosen field. She had moved to a different city and was working as a receptionist at a law firm, living paycheck to paycheck and struggling to rebuild her reputation. The sophisticated, manipulative woman who had destroyed Sarah's marriage had been reduced to a cautionary tale about the consequences of greed and infidelity. Sarah should have felt vindicated by their continued suffering, but instead she felt empty. The revenge that had once given her life purpose and direction had run its course, leaving her to confront the reality of her own transformation. She had become someone she didn't recognize, harder, colder, more calculating than the woman who had once believed in the fundamental goodness of people. As she sat in her quiet house, surrounded by the comfortable life she had rebuilt with her recovered inheritance, Sarah realized that her revenge had been both perfectly executed and ultimately hollow. She had destroyed the people who had wronged her, but she had also destroyed parts of herself that she could never recover. The inheritance that had started it all, her grandmother's legacy of hard work, family values, and immigrant determination, had become a weapon of mass destruction that had claimed 4 lives: David's, Vanessa's, and in many ways, her own. The 4th victim was the woman Sarah had been before the betrayal, trusting, forgiving, and capable of love. In the end, Sarah's revenge had been more complete than she had ever imagined. She had not only destroyed David and Vanessa's lives, but had also fundamentally altered her own identity in ways that would echo through the rest of her existence. The victory was hers, but it was a Pyrrhic victory that left her questioning whether justice and revenge were worth the price she had ultimately paid. As she looked toward an uncertain future, Sarah Mitchell, the wronged wife who had exacted perfect revenge, faced the most difficult challenge of all, learning to live with the person she had become in the process of destroying the people who had wronged her. The inheritance had been recovered, the revenge had been complete, but the cost had been higher than anyone could have imagined.